Hello and welcome to Tar Heel Teachers Presents, the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools Board of Education Candidates Forum. I'm Marlo Artis. For this special episode, I'm speaking with individuals who are seeking seats on the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools Board of Education. 6 candidates are vying for 3 seats. All candidates were invited, and I'm very appreciative that 5 candidates are able to join us for this discussion. The candidates in the alphabetical order by last name are George Griffin, Reza Jenkins, Meredith Pruitt, Mike Sharp, and Tim Sukram. Here are a few guidelines for our conversation. Thank you all so much for joining us. Each individual will have 90 seconds for opening remarks. Each individual will have 90 seconds to respond to each question. A yellow card, here's my yellow card, will let you know that 30 seconds remain. A red card will appear when the 90 seconds have expired. If a candidate exceeds the 90-second time allotment, I will politely intervene so that we can make sure that we're staying on our time schedule. And please wrap up your thoughts at that particular moment. I want you to finish your thoughts, but please wrap it up quickly. George will be the first person to respond to the first question. Reza will answer the second question first. Meredith will answer the third question first. Mike will answer the fourth question first. And Tim will answer the 5th question first. The question order will rotate throughout this conversation to ensure fairness. We are now going to start the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools Board of Education Forum. And this first question goes to George. Could you please provide us with some background information about you? And please share why you want to be elected to the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools Board of Education.
Hello, my name is George Griffin, and I'm excited to be here. I've lived in Chapel Hill for over 40 years. I have 2 adult children, who went through the Chapel Hill Carrboro schools, kindergarten through 12th grade. I have a 3-year-old grandson who lives nearby, and he is definitely the joy of my life. I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, attended public schools there, came to North Carolina to go to college as an undergraduate at Duke. Have a degree there and my master's in special education from Duke and a PhD in special education from the University of North Carolina here in Chapel Hill. I just recently retired from a 46-year career in education and teaching administration. I've been a special education teacher in Durham and at Phillips Middle School here in Chapel Hill. I've been a high school principal at Durham Riverside, Williams High School in Burlington. I worked as an assistant principal at Apex High School in Wake County. I have been a program director. I've been a university professor at North Carolina Central University. You can tell when you're around for 46 years, I get to do a lot of things. I'm running for the board now, literally to pay it forward. That's to give back to my community, some service, if you will. And I'm also a strong believer in public education. I want to leave the system better for the future than it is today. I believe that public education is the bedrock of our democracy, and it needs all the help it can get. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Reza, same question.
Good evening. My name is Reza Jenkins. My experience and my commitment to education are the reasons why I'm running for Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools Board of Education. I'm a graduate of North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, holding degrees in business management and marketing. I'm also a graduate of Howard University with my JD MBA. I've worked in the clean energy industry for 7 years, and I'm the vice president of asset management for Summit Ridge Energy. My leadership in the clean energy industry extends to my board position on the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association, where I'm the chair of the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. My commitment to serving the community at our school spans almost 10 years in this district. I served as the vice president, and advocacy chair for the Sewell Elementary PTA, and I've served on the Sewell Elementary School Improvement Team. I'm the immediate past president of the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools PTA Council. In my leadership role on the PTA Council, it allowed me to serve on various district level committees and task forces. I volunteered as the elementary faith development kindergarten teacher at St. Thomas More, and I'm the proud mother of 3 children in our school system at Smith Middle School and Sewell Elementary. Education is the cornerstone of our society. When we ensure all students are able to have their educational needs met, We also support their nutrition and social emotional needs as well, and they will be set up for success. I know my experiences with strategic decision-making and engagement in our schools for almost 10 years will provide me with the foundation to be a great Board of Education member. Thank you.
Thank you, Riza. Meredith.
Hi, I'm Meredith Pruitt. Pleasure to be with you all. Marlo, thanks to you and your team for setting up this little forum. This is great. And to my fellow candidates, I just want to wish you all the best of luck over the next couple of months. It's going to be a fun ride. I know we can all agree that the past couple of years have brought disruption and uneasiness, and most particular to our parents and students, administrators and principals and teachers. And I think it's time that we need to reset, refocus, and rethink how we're ensuring public education for all students and empowering them to lead lives of leadership and service. And I believe we need a Board of Education who will do just that. Folks who think pragmatically, who are data-driven, who we can listen to, and who we can trust. I've spent 20 years on the national level in public policy and here in the state of North Carolina. And I think I know what it takes to succeed and to turn the tide. And that's why I'm running for Board of Education. For me, it's really about ensuring our students are in the class full-time learning and ensuring that we're thinking about the fundamentals of reading, math, and science. It's about really turning the opportunity gap on its head and empowering our teachers and administrators to develop opportunities. I think lastly, we have a real opportunity in this area of the state to partner with local universities and business leaders and ensure that our students have meaningful opportunities, both internships and student learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. Mike.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Sharp. I've been a teacher in the Chapel Hill district for 16 years. And I'm also a longtime parent in the district. My oldest daughter has just graduated from Chapel Hill High, but she started in kindergarten and went all through the system. I have another daughter who is a junior currently at Chapel Hill High School. And then I've also got a 4-year-old son who's just starting at Sewell in pre-K program, and a 2-year-old who will be coming along shortly as well. So by the time all this is over, I will have done more than 30 years as a parent in the district as well. My goal in joining the school board would be to try to speak for our different groups who are underrepresented and don't get enough spoken for them in general. So I'm talking about, if we're talking about athletics, then I want to talk about transgender kids and I want to talk about how that's going to affect them. If we're talking about academics, and I'm going to bring up EC and EL populations and make sure that they're addressed as well. I also think that as a former teacher and as a longtime teacher, that I offer a unique perspective that would be helpful for the board. I know, for example, in equity issues, I know what things have worked in the past, what things haven't worked, what things were working and then got changed anyway. So I think teachers in a lot of ways hold that institutional memory that would be valuable for the board to be able to hear about. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Tim.
Hi, my name is Tim Sukram. I'm running for Chapel Hill Carrboro Board of Education. It's my 8th year here in Chapel Hill. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. I am a civil rights lawyer. I work for Legal Aid in North Carolina. I'm married, and my wife and I have 2 children, ages 4 and 6. My daughter is a first grader at Ephesus Elementary, and my son will be joining kindergarten at Ephesus next year. I'm on the school improvement team at Ephesus, and I'm running because I think that we can do better. I think we can always do better, but I think in particular, the school board has a lot of issues with communication, with transparency, with making long-term decisions, and a failure to use available resources. And when I say that, I mean the people in our community and the people who are working at our schools who know how education works just about as well as anybody in the state. I think there's some of the best folks in the state are serving our students here, and I think we need to listen to folks in the community and the teachers that work here, including the staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tim. All right, this first question will go with Teresa. What attributes are essential for successful school board members? How do you exhibit these characteristics in your personal and professional lives?
So I think there are three essential attributes when serving on a board. One, you have to listen. Two, you have to be able to gather all the information. And three, you have to have a sound strategic decision-making process. First off, as I previously stated, I do serve on a board for the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association, and I've served on the school improvement team for Sewell Elementary. And one other thing, when my kids were in pre-K, I served on their parent group, which was similar to the school improvement team as well. And so in serving on all these positions, it's key that you listen to all your stakeholders, right? So they're the students, they're the staff, they're your community, and you really listen to them, what their concerns are. Next, you want to make sure that you're clear in terms of, the goals of your decision and what you're trying to make. And finally, you want to have clear metrics to assess and make those decisions. You can't just be making decisions just because it makes people feel good, because we're making decisions about students' lives, our community, and how it impacts it. So those are going to be some critical things that we want to do whenever we're making decisions.
Thank you, Risa. Meredith.
I don't know why that was a surprise. Yeah, like Riza, I would agree. Listening is sort of key to serving on any board. I think especially in this community. I think over the past 2 years, we had a lot of different voices. And so being able to kind of cull that down and come up with some ideas on what the community is feeling. I think you have to serve as an advocate of those viewpoints. And I think part of that is kind of distilling the information, listening to experts, and then making data-driven decisions about the way forward for our parents and teachers and students and administrators and principals, and actually, being a really responsible steward of taxpayer dollars. As we all know, we pay a lot of money to live and thrive in this school district, and so we need, like Tim said, greater transparency in how we're doing that. So I feel like I'm a pretty trustworthy person. I'm a problem solver on the national and state level. I was an author of the UNC's 5-year strategic plan, measurable expectations for our university system of all 17 institutions. So listening, advocating, data-driven decisions, being a strong steward of taxpayer dollars, that's what I think it would take to serve on this board.
Thank you, Meredith. Mike.
Well, I'm going to add on to what they've already said. I think that's going to be a trend here tonight. I think it's important for somebody on the board to think of themselves as a representative rather than an expert. So when issues come up, we shouldn't be expected to already have all the information. I think it's totally fine for the board to ask for clarification, ask for more information, find out from real experts what studies have been done, that kind of thing. But I also think, like was said before, that listening is key to that. So we need to listen to our constituents. We need to listen to the experts. We need to listen to what we hear about prior decisions that got made. I have a lot of experience in my job of being a representative of my colleagues. I've been a grade level chair for many different years. I was the teacher of the year from McDougall Elementary in 2014. And I've often been a spokesperson for the staff to talk to admin about issues that come up. So I'm a people person and work well with other people and helping to make those decisions, but I'm also recognizing that listening is key and making sure that you're representing the people that you should be representing.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Mike. Excuse me. Tim.
No worries.
I think I want to echo that listening to the community is probably the most vital skill, but a really important part of that is actually soliciting feedback and making people know that their communication to you is welcome. So a lot of it is not just waiting for somebody to call out to you and tell you what's going on, but to ask the right questions of the right people, put the megaphone out there to the crowd and really be interested in what they have to say. After that, the most important thing is making informed decisions based on that information, whether it be from an expert, from a teacher, from a parent, from a student, even from a concerned community member. And the final and most important part, I think, is communication, which is, relaying your decisions back and letting the folks in the community know how it affects them, and make sure that they understand after you've communicated to them the nuances of that decision.
Thank you, Tim. George.
Thank you. I appreciate everything that people have said. I think one of the biggest attributes is what I'll just call focus. I think the school board needs a clear focus in terms of its role as policymakers, leaders, and guides. When I say focus, I mean not getting caught up in all of the day-to-day details, the administrative operations of the district, which is the job of the superintendent and the staff, is to run the district. There are so many issues that come. So the primary one would be to develop a clear focus based on a set of values and beliefs that can help guide the district. I agree with everybody who has mentioned metrics and the use of data. I've had the luxury or the privilege of working with school boards in 25 states in the past decade. And effective school boards are clear about their role as policymakers, but they also use data practically for every decision they make. So that's critical. And then certainly engaging stakeholders, engaging everybody in an inclusive manner. My colleagues here used the word being a good listener. I think that's vital as well. So I think those are my three. Thanks.
Thank you, George. Next question. Local school board members have had to shoulder a lot of responsibility in terms of COVID-19 decision-making. What are your thoughts about how the school system is managing COVID-19? We'll start with Meredith.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess one of my focal points of my platform is that I think students need to be in school full-time learning. And I would say that that hasn't happened over the past year and a half. And I'd say that we could have done a much better job in thinking about data points that came down from the CDC or the American Journal of Pediatrics or whomever it was who had some thoughts. I mean, I think we should trust the experts. I think it was Mike who said, we ourselves may not be experts in a particular issue area, but it's our responsibility in these elected positions to take that information, synthesize it, deduce it to policy recommendations that we then administer to the school district. So I think they could have done a better job. I will say I don't know if anyone was expecting what we expected in March of 2021. So I think there's opportunity to do a much better job moving forward. And while I appreciate their service, I do think transparency and communication would have gone a long way to even perception of the work.
Thank you, Meredith. Mike.
Thanks. I'm going to first jump onto something that Meredith said, that no one knew what to expect. So I think, we've got to take looking at any decision that got made and step back and say, okay, everybody was trying the best that they could. And so I don't want to fault any decisions that were made too much, during this time, just because everybody really was faced with something totally unknown. I will say that I appreciate that the district has been cautious. As an employee, that was really meaningful to me. As a parent of kids who were still not vaccinated, I'm still interested in, making sure that we're being safe as much as possible. And I think, like I talked about before, I think the board are not the experts here. The board needs to make sure that they are consulting with experts and making decisions that, based on data that's passed down to them. And I do feel like their partnership with the ABC Collaborative was a good way to do that. And I think that they're working with experts to try to make the best decisions and also to try to be safe, I think was the most important part of that.
Thank you, Mike. Tim.
I think Mike is right, is that it's very important to be cautious about the decisions that were made, over a year ago, when we knew very little about the pandemic or about the virus. But I do want to focus on that it took a long time. We have a long time, had a long time to think about this, and we have a lot more information, a lot more research, a lot more science. And I feel like one of the big problems with the board is that they're kind of catching up right now. I think that they'll cut them off guard. They're just now trying to figure out how to get kids to eat outside, for example. And I think that we could have planned ahead a lot better. The alternative learning program, I think that could have been planned ahead a lot better. But my biggest issue is transparency. When I get an email from my principal about a COVID case, it says it's in the community, and it doesn't say this is a parent, this is a child, this was a transfer, that a class was quarantined, or that this is a staff member. And I understand the need for anonymity, but I think that they are going way too far in the direction of opacity rather than transparency.
Thank you, Tim. George.
I think the board has had the best interest of students and the staff at heart from the get-go. We had a major leadership turnover right in the middle of the pandemic. The former superintendent left, and there was a leadership void there. Dr. Hamlet came on board in January and has hit the ground running, making as many decisions on the fly as everybody has with COVID, trying to balance the need for public health against the need to keep our kids in class. I mean, I think everybody has agreed we want our students in class. And we also agree pretty much we want people to be healthy and safe from the virus. And the data keeps coming in, and until just recently, things have shifted fairly quickly. So, I think the board has had its heart in the right place and has done the best they can. Most recently, I think they've hit their stride with the ABC Collaborative, listening to the experts. I think they're pretty focused right now on making decisions and getting them out there that are in the best interest of the students and staff. Thanks.
Thank you, George. Risa.
Yes. Decision-making is challenging and difficult. And then when you layer in a pandemic that's ever changing, it makes it even more challenging. I believe our Board of Education did the best job that they could during this pandemic. No one could have expected it. No one gets trained in this type of decision-making. No one went to school for this. So I do believe that they were focusing on the key stakeholders and what was important, first and foremost, which was our safety and well-being of our students and staff. During this pandemic, I was behind the scenes with a lot of decisions that were being made, serving on task force and committees like the calendar committee. So every time a law changed about when school was going to reopen, I would see behind the scenes how quickly the district staff was balancing all the requirements of the district and however the board had guided them. So honestly, I think this district really tried, and this board really tried their best. They relied on the experts and as much as the information that they had available to them at that time, like so many other boards across the country did. So, hindsight is great and we can have it, but I think they did the best that they could considering this was a pandemic that we haven't seen in over 100 years. So.
Thank you, Risa. Next question. Orange County schools employees must be get vaccinated, and other districts are considering similar mandates. Should Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools require its employees to get the COVID-19 vaccine? We'll start with Mike.
I'm not sure I'm going to fill up 90 seconds with this. Absolutely. I think that we require other vaccines for employees and for our kids to attend school. I don't think it's unreasonable. We've given it enough time that the FDA feels confident, at least in the Pfizer vaccine, and probably will soon approve the others as well. And I think it's just a clear path forward that we should be asking our staff to be vaccinated in the best interest of our kids.
Thank you, Mike. Tim.
Yes, absolutely. No question. The staff should be vaccinated. And I think it would be an easy process because I think that most of the staff probably already had the foresight to go ahead and get vaccinated. And I think anyone that's straggling, that's left over, there's more data about this than almost any other kind of medicine. So many people have taken it. That there's no question as to the safety of it and the effectiveness.
Thank you, Tim. George.
I started kindergarten. I know that seems a long time ago to some people. The polio epidemic was raging here in the United States. I lived in Detroit, Michigan. July 4th, my mother got polio from the virus while we were at a neighborhood bike parade. I was in it. She went off to a hospital, never to return for a year, and was paralyzed and became a paraplegic from polio. And when she came home the next year, that was her life. The polio vaccine was developed a year later, 1955, and it changed the world for the better. And so I have a personal connection way back when we had that last serious epidemic. And so I absolutely would support requiring vaccination anywhere it's legal and lawful. Thanks.
Thank you, George. Reza.
Yes, I do support the vaccine mandate. However, I would like, some additional considerations when we're making this decision. One, we want to be creative and considerate of our staff's concerns. We have widespread staff shortages, not only in this district, but across the country. And so as we continue to exacerbate and, put our teachers at odds and our staff at odds in terms of their employment, we want to be thoughtful about why they're concerned about getting a vaccine and value them as not only our staff, but also valuable members of our community. And so we just want to listen to their concerns. If we can be creative, so if there's staff who make a decision to not get vaccinated because we do have shortages in positions, there are any remote opportunities for work. It would be great to fill those vacancies with the staff who may choose not to get vaccinated at this time. Look, I know it's easy for a lot of us to say, get the vaccine, and we understand the science, but we do have to be sensitive that there are many communities who have concerns and historical experiences regarding vaccines and the medical industry and how they've been treated.
Thank you, Reza. Meredith.
So I guess my answer is that, science has spoken, is continuing to speak. There's a lot of data behind the recommendations on behalf of medical experts. And so the extent to which as many people in our school system can get vaccinated, it makes good sense.
Thank you, Meredith. Next question. Is there a silver lining from COVID-19 in terms of practices and procedures that the district or schools have implemented that should be expanded once things return to normal? We'll start with Tim.
It is really hard to see a silver lining behind all of this. I think I would need more than a minute to think about that. I think that I liked the approach that the PTA took, where they stopped fundraising for things like parties and celebrations, and they started fundraising to feed the kids in our district. And I think that is a program that should continue if possible. The one thing that I liked from last year was that the school started later, and I really appreciated that. And I've noticed that some parents have said that they were able to take more time. They were able to walk to school and feel like part of the school community. And so, yeah, I think school should start later. That's probably the best I can do. It's just silver lining. COVID has been a real unprecedented problem for everybody. It's hard to see a positive, but there have been. So thank you.
Thank you, Tim. George.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of silver linings, which is a weird thing to say. I think one is we have learned a lot about health and safety protocols in school the whole idea of lunches being outdoors and open air and just practicing good hygiene is going to be a real plus in schools because you know how the viruses just get passed around. I think we've learned that we can do a lot of meetings remotely as adults, and perhaps we can stop requiring teachers to run here and run there all the time and let them sit in their classroom and attend that meeting, except where it in person makes some sense. Children who are absent from school because they're sick or they can't attend or they're on a family, whatever, out of town, could attend remotely. And if nothing else, it doesn't have to be a special teacher does anything remotely. Just zoom into the classroom and stay connected with what went on in class that day, unless you just can't do it. So lots of excitement. And we've also certainly learned that teaching remotely is real different from teaching in the classroom. And it's not just a simple matter of let's turn a camera on and then teachers will be able to do everything. Teachers are going to need support. It's going to take special training. So we've learned a lot. And I think there's lots of good things that could come out of this. Thanks.
Thank you, George. Risa.
Yes, I'm going to say something that might surprise some people. One silver lining was the Virtual Learning Academy that came out of the pandemic. Look, they've had it in other districts and other states. And so the pandemic actually showed this district that we could do it and we can implement it. So now we have it for our high school students, and they're trying to figure out something for our K-8, but hopefully we can do it because not all students were engaging in our educational classrooms in a positive way prior to the pandemic. So this was really creating an opportunity for some of our students who were actually successful in the virtual environment. Also, the family outreach actually increased. It was great as the president of the PTA Council to see the growth of parent and community participation in efforts that we have been doing for so long in the PTA with few hands, but we're doing great things, raising thousands of dollars every year to feed, clothe, and support our families. And to see that grow and to see an increased interest in our diverse communities in our Chapel Hill Carver City Schools was wonderful. And so I hope that those community members who are now aware of the work that the PTA have been doing for years and years here, I hope those community members will continue to support our PTA, Table, the Public School Foundation, and Porch going forward. Also, I think it really did strengthen our community. We had to be creative in how we interacted with each other and be inclusive. So thank you.
Thank you, Risa. Meredith.
Yeah, I would agree and echo Risa's comments about the community coming together. I know here in our neighborhood and within our elementary school, we were able to meet a lot of folks from the community who we hadn't before. And I think pulling through for families who needed it most was probably one of the biggest silver linings to this. I think the other piece of this is, and I don't have the data and the percentages, but I do think that we learned how customized learning and the use of technology can be effective for some students. We know that not all students thrive in a large classroom, and we know that not all students are thriving on the computer, but I do think we can, over the next couple of years, kind of maybe find out some of those learnings about ways in which we can better use technology, both for educational outcomes, but also for financial efficiency. So that's a question for the current board about if they could maybe analyze that, but those would be two things that I'd say are the silver lining.
Thank you, Meredith. Mike.
It was funny. I thought it was difficult to go first, but now I think it's difficult to go last because everyone's already said everything. I would echo a couple of things that I've already heard. From the boots on the ground perspective of being a teacher, having everyone more digitally savvy is really going to be helpful in coming years. So kids being familiar with logging into all these different programs that they weren't familiar with a couple of years ago, we can continue to use that. We've got more computers per kid than we used to have before, and they're being used much better. Instead of just sitting in a closet most of the time, computers are being used much more often. But also, like George was hinting at, when a kid is home, when a kid is suspended, when a family is on vacation, it's still possible that they can be working. And that was never the case before. One thing I would add to that, just from a teacher perspective, is also that because we said remote learning is different. It's a different kind of teaching. We learned that some things that we do really weren't primary and could go away. Homework, I would suggest, for example. And there are many things about teaching remotely that forced us to sort of pare down to what is the essence of what we're teaching. And I think that was helpful for teachers and will continue to be helpful even when we're all back in the regular classroom together.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Let's shift the conversation. So last week, Coburn Middle School was in the headlines because a painted pride flag was removed from a classroom wall. The removal caused some to question if the school truly value inclusion. As a board member, what would have been your response if a community member had reached out to you? We'll start with George.
Thanks, Marlo. I am very clear on being inclusive all the time. In saying so right up front. So I would support intervening wherever necessary to protect the individual liberties of each student, whether they're gender issues, racial issues, behavioral issues, whatever the issue might be. But in a case like that, I think that's where when I mentioned earlier, the board needs to be clear on its values and beliefs. And what our community stands for and what we believe in. And so we need a clear set of values and certainly protecting the gender rights of all students would be one of them that I would support very actively at all times. Thanks.
Thank you, George. Riza.
Yes, so our district prides itself in being a community that is inclusive for all communities. So that's first. With this particular situation, if a community member were to raise this concern to me as a board member, one, I would just listen to the concern and understand why that concern exists. Now, here's the challenging thing. As a board member, there's not anything we can directly do about this specific staff and school issue. So then as a board member, it would be my role to take this to the superintendent and share that I'm hearing these concerns and why we're hearing these concerns. And also just remind and convey, our commitment to our diverse communities and leave it up to the superintendent to address this issue specifically. Look, I could share personally how I want to handle it, but at the end of the day, we have to remember our role as a board. And because this is a staff level situation in a school where there's a principal, we would have to go to the superintendent and allow Dr. Hamlet, in this case, to manage the situation.
Thank you, Riza. Meredith.
Well, Riza took my answer, so that's a bummer. But anyway, no, I mean, seriously, on a serious note, this is actually an interesting question because it does call into question what the role of a board member is, and I do think that we have a responsibility in general to educate the public on what the role of the board member is, what the role of superintendent is, what the role of principal, teacher, on down the line. I don't know that there's a widespread understanding of that. So I agree with George. We have to have a set of values. I do think this is a school district that prides itself on a diverse populace, and they do a decent, good job of that. But I think at the end of the day, it's not the role of a board member to necessarily act on it. It is the role of a board member to listen to the issue and then take it to the appropriate individual or leader.
Thank you, Meredith. Mike.
In this situation, the principal made a decision to paint over the flag after an employee had put it up. And she said later that it was because she had moved that employee to a different classroom and wasn't sure how the incoming teacher would feel about having a flag on the wall. So as a board, when I hear that, I would think, okay, that means that we weren't clear enough in what we mean when we say that we support our transgender community and our LGBTQ plus community, because this principal wasn't sure. And so we need to look at why that was, because now I know, I actually worked at Culbreth last year. So I know that the school is very proactive. There's an active gay student association at Culbreth. I know that the principal supported many efforts that we did, with social emotional learning. but she wasn't clear on what to do in this situation. And I think that's the key. I think that's where we need to, start to look with a microscope at what exactly happened there. Not in terms of fault, but in terms of the fact that our staff didn't know exactly how to react to that. And I think it needs to be clear that, what those reactions should be in all cases.
Thank you, Mike. Tim.
I think regardless of the technical authorities of the board, it's very important for the school board to, send out a strong message of what they believe in, regardless of their capabilities to affect what may seem like a minor decision because it is in one classroom in one school in the entire district. I think it's important to communicate that overarching message that we actually do care and that this is something that feels symbolic to a lot of people. And it is, fairly symbolic. And I think it makes sense not to diminish the importance of that and to communicate to the community that in words that folks of all sexual orientations and races and religions and gender identities are welcome in the school district, but to also promulgate our own symbols and to say it symbolically as a board that we care about this stuff too.
Thank you, Tim. One more question before we take a quick break. From time to time, a school board is tasked with filling a vacant seat. Last February, the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools Board of Education used an unconventional method to appoint a new school board member, a coin flip. This decision sparked a lot of conversation about the process and a missed opportunity to bring a Latinx voice to the board. How would you have approached that decision if you were on the board? We'll start with Riza.
Yes, again, this goes back to decision making. The board was faced with something they hadn't been faced for before, which was a tie to fill a vacant board seat. And I think the missed opportunity was for the board to take a step back. And again, before they were making the decision, lay out the metrics for how they were going to decide how to fill this board seat. That's how I typically, the board I serve on, that's typically what we're doing whenever we're filling vacant board seats as well. And so I think that was the missed opportunity initially, was what were the metrics that they were looking for, one, in a candidate to fill this vacant board seat, because that would have probably tipped or influenced potentially how the vote may have gone. Look, the coin flip was quite interesting to watch when it happened. But I think that was the challenge. The board wasn't clear in terms of what their goal was in terms of filling the board seat. They may have thought it individually, but they didn't communicate it publicly and outwardly in terms of how they were going to make that decision.
Thank you, Riza. Meredith.
I will admit I don't have a great answer for this. It strikes me it's hard to think about a coin flip in a democracy. So, I would just say that there may have been a better route to take. I haven't given it a lot of thought. And I don't really have a great answer other than I haven't given it a lot of thought. It does strike me as odd. And maybe there could be a better alternative.
Thank you, Meredith. Mike.
I think we did hear later on that there was a metric that the district has proposed using in situations like this to try to increase our diversity on different roles. And it sounds like, we know that it wasn't used at the time, and it sounds like maybe they were considering that to be a misstep. I think the important thing here is that there was no reason that it had to be done that moment. And if they got to the point where they're like, oh, I guess maybe we'll do a coin flip, then they should have taken a step back and said, let's wait and decide what our process should be here to make sure that we are making the best decision for our entire community. There was no reason that we had to have a person appointed by the next morning. And so we could have taken more time to make a more conscious effort toward making a good decision.
Thank you, Mike. Tim.
I've seen this a lot in different like election contests, and it seems crass. And it seems crass, especially in this situation, because it's not a winner loser kind of deal. It's a responsibility that you are bestowing on somebody. And I think, you know, unless we were okay with the vacancy for a certain amount of time, and we couldn't have been okay for, I don't know, another day, another minute, like Mike said. But I think in that situation, it would make more sense to say, step back, delegate the decision to a committee or a group that could make a recommendation as far as one candidate. If that had already been done, maybe we should have looked at who they recommended. But yeah, giving us this, you know, heads or tails choice just seems to diminish the responsibility that's given to the person in the end.
Thank you, Tim. George.
But it, you know, using a coin flip was not in hindsight a good decision at all, and shouldn't have been used. I think Riza started us off with an excellent summary of getting clear on the front end. What exactly are the criteria? What are we looking for? And then finding, I think, what were the 12, or maybe this was one had 18 applicants. Which one of those applicants most closely fits our criteria would be the question I would be asking over and over and over until we arrived at a decision, regardless of how long it took. Thanks.
Thank you, George. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll continue our conversation with the candidates for the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools Board of Education. We'll be right back. We are back on Tar Heel Teachers Presents, and we're having a conversation with candidates for the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools Board of Education. And our next question. Last week, there were 2 school shootings here in North Carolina, which continues the dialogue about the presence of SROs in our schools. Last month, the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools Board of Education voted to approve an interim agreement with local law enforcement to place SROs in the secondary schools. The district has created a school safety task force to submit recommendations, which may modify the role of SROs in Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools. What are your thoughts about the role of SROs in Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools? And we'll start with Meredith.
I think the times in which we're living now are certainly different than when I was growing up, some 35 or so years ago. We didn't require any sort of school safety in the way that I think we're seeing over the past 20 years, schools requiring, whether it's K through 12 or higher education, certainly on college and community college campuses. I think we live in a world of laws and rules, and we need some sort of enforcement when things get violent. And so having some trained safety officials on site at these institutions makes some good sense to me. I mean, I think it's kind of common sense in that regard of if there are going to be fights that break out, our teachers and principals and administrators are probably not trained to measure up against some of these younger kids who are stronger and more spry, I would say. So I would love to learn more about across the country, what has worked and what hasn't. I think this is another opportunity to think about data and what's been successful, how we've measured it across the country, and look to some of our peers in other institutions or other places who've done it well, and maybe apply that here.
Thank you, Meredith. Mike.
I'm going to respond to what Meredith said first. Just from a teacher perspective, there are many of us who actually are trained in things like restraints and other situations in order to handle when fights break out or when violence occurs. And the biggest part of that training is that we're also focusing on de-escalation, identifying when somebody is starting to show signs of future violence so that we can bring it down before it gets to that point. I have worked with many SROs in the district, and they're all fine people. I'm not going to cast aspersions on them or how they're doing their job, but I don't feel like it's appropriate to have them in our schools. And the biggest reason is that there are many students who come to our schools with a negative perception of police officers, and in many cases that's well-founded because they've seen mistreatment by our society, and it's mostly in the form of police officers and how they're treating people of color. And as much as we might like to think that having a police officer in the school who says, "Hey, I'll play basketball with y'all so you know that I'm a cool guy," it's not going to change the perception of these kids because they've seen their uncle get arrested. They know that their mother panicked when they got pulled over at a traffic stop. And the little benefit that we get from having the officers in school who don't normally respond to events by the way they show up later, I just don't think it's worth it.
Thank you, Mike. Tim.
Yeah.
So I did grow up in a time when there were shootings in schools, and I did grow up in a time when there were school resource officers. And as much as I respect the police and their capabilities to serve our community, including our school community, I don't think that I am not certain that it helps. And I think we need to be cautious and hesitant about recommending these kinds of solutions. And I think we need to, while safety is important, I think what we need to also think about, what we also need to prioritize is to get at the root of the problem and understand why children are deciding to resort to lethal violence in an attempt to solve their problems. And I think that in very many issues, we need social workers in the schools, we need psychologists in the schools, rather than having someone walking around with cuffs and a gun. Because when I was in middle school and there was someone with cuffs and a gun, he scared everybody, and he scared me. And it's not just because I'm a minority. Having a cop around is, in general, it can be unsettling to a lot of people, and it can make some people feel more secure. But we need to, realize, what is the best method for addressing these things. And I don't think that more police officers is the best method. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. George.
Thanks. The SROs are not needed in every school. I want to be real clear about that. School safety is ultimately the responsibility of the school principal, faculty, and the staff. And even if they do have an SRO in that school, that person should be a part of the overall plan and the team under the direction of the administration, and not functioning unilaterally or not having some special status. This is not a commentary on individual SROs. I've worked with them in 3 high schools, 3 districts over the years, but always under the direction of the administration. Also, the reality is we have major equity issues here in the district. The so-called achievement gap that's been present forever, 50 years, continues. And part of it is school discipline issues. Non-white students, Black students, we have data that they have far more interactions with school resource officers than white kids do. That's telling us something. It's telling us what we need to listen to and what we need to do. I've talked to several parents just recently who told me about school resource officers responding to regular disciplinary calls from teachers in classrooms. when nobody else was available. That's just simply not acceptable. So no, we don't need school resource officers in all our schools, but we do need safe schools. And that's the responsibility of the administration and the faculty and that school community. Thanks.
Thank you, George. Risa.
So I'm actually from Winston-Salem, so I'm quite familiar with Mount Tabor High School and had several friends who had children at the school and surrounding schools. So this school shooting really hit home for me as I followed the events unfold the entire day and in the days afterward. I actually served on the formerly named SRO task force, which a group of us pushed to have it renamed to the Safety Task Force. And the reason why we pushed to that, because focusing on SROs turned it into a very personal decision. And so we heard a lot of personal stories about the individual SROs. And that's not what this decision was about. So we asked the district staff to take a step back and have us really define what safety is in our district first. Next, we also asked them to make sure when they're asking how they define safety, who is defining it and how are they defining it? Because it looks different. I think several other people have shared that, depending on who you are and how you interact with the schools and if it happens to be an SRO. Additionally, we want to challenge our community to ask themselves as they're pushing for certain safety measures or procedures, who are we trying to be safe from and why? So when we start challenging ourselves and asking ourselves these questions as we're making decisions, we're going to uncover some biases that some of us have shared and how we implement decisions, processes, and procedures and plans.
Thank you, Risa. Next question. This year marks 60 years since desegregation began in Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools, yet data shows that the racial disparities persist, with white students accessing more opportunities and facing less disciplinary action than Black students. White students in the district are 3.5 times more likely to be identified as gifted, and white students are 4.3 times more likely to be enrolled in at least one AP class than Black students. At Chapel Hill High, Black students are 43.5 times more likely to be suspended than white students. What can be done to address these opportunity gaps and exclusionary practices? We'll start with Mike.
I think the single biggest contributing factor there is more racial equity training for our staff. Many of those things, who gets into AP classes, who gets identified as gifted, what kind of response happens to disruption in class, most of that is a teacher level decision. And our staff needs to have better training, especially to recognize biases, even if they're unintentional biases, and systemic problems that we have. For example, the same behavior in a Black student and a white student is often handled differently. An outburst in class by a Black male is more likely to result in a write-up or some kind of discipline than the same exact behaviors from a white student. And the teachers can call it whatever they want, but they need to recognize, I mean, like they might say that it was, you know, someone was being disrespectful to me, which is very sort of vague and subjective. And so we need these trainings and we need ongoing training. A lot of us have had, you know, an intro to equity training, but for some teachers, it got uncomfortable and then the principals backed off and said, oh, well, you know, we don't want anybody to feel uncomfortable. But we need to recognize that those conversations are going to be uncomfortable and that's necessary. And it's an important part of where we go from here.
Thank you, Mike. Tim.
Well, I agree that the training is incredibly important. I think that there is only so much equity training that you can do. And I think that there are only so many people that you can reach with these kinds of courses. Now, I think it's absolutely a fantastic idea to go forward with, but I think there are also other tracks that we need to pursue. And one of the biggest ones is trying to recruit staff and teachers, and this includes administrators, principals, vice principals, who are, try to recruit a body of racially diverse people, people who understand the experiences of our students, who understand, who may have looked at authority figures in a certain way in the past and understand why someone might act or react in a certain way to a student, and think twice about that. And somebody that students can feel comfortable talking to about these kinds of things, and somebody who can report these kinds of things up, and someone who can also educate the other staff about it and make them understand how they might treat their students differently. And I think that's very important. And I know it's a big hill to climb, but I've got ideas about that too. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. George.
Thank you. Over 25 years ago, when I was teaching at Phillips Middle School, I had been there a couple of weeks. And the brand new principal, Alton Cheek, came by my classroom after school one day, and he was African-American. I'm obviously white. And he said to me, George, I've learned something about this school. So when the Black kids get in trouble in class here, they get sent to the office. When the white kids get in trouble, they get sent to guidance. And it's an indication of the subtle differences that affect Black students here in the district. And that right away starts the whole process being different. And sadly, there's still too many stories of that kind of thing today. I'm not pointing fingers at Phillips or staff or anybody, but that's the reality. 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, I wrote an op-ed piece for the News and Observer on white male privilege in education. Basically said, we go to lots of trainings, we leave, we go home, do the same thing we've always done. Nobody calls me on it because I'm white. But I haven't really changed my behavior. And I talked about critical race theory at that point 20 years ago, because I was on the faculty at North Carolina Central University, and we were studying what impact critical race theory might have as we taught teachers for the future. And I'd be glad to share that article if anybody wants to see it. So there is an inordinate amount of disciplinary actions that do affect non-white students. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Risa.
Yes. So this issue with the achievement and opportunity gap is quite big and challenging. So answering in 90 seconds, I'm going to take a go at it. One, we definitely need to make sure that all staff are receiving this racial equity diversity training. It's interesting, I served on my school improvement team, and if you ask your school staff or your principal what training staff receives, you won't get a complete answer. You actually won't get an answer in terms of who's receiving what training. So that's the first thing. We have to make sure all staff are receiving the training. Secondly, we want to make sure we have more support staff in the area of social emotional learning, especially in our elementary schools, because it starts there. It really starts in our early childhood education, making sure we're supporting our kids emotionally and socially, and making sure their needs are being met there. Also, I think when we talk about hiring diverse staff, we really need to understand what diversity means. It's not just racial diversity, but it's also socioeconomic, gender, sexual orientation, and things like that. Also, we want to focus on core, solid instruction for all students. And the emphasis is on all students. It's interesting how we always focus simply on our upper achieving students and things like that. Also, through collaborative efforts with our county and our state, we really need to implement universal pre-K. All the research is there. It starts from the early childhood education. If we can start decreasing that opportunity gap from actually birth to before they get to school, that's where we're going to really see some strides in closing the achievement gap.
Thank you, Risa. Meredith.
Sure. So opportunity gap, something I've been working on for now opportunity gap, formerly achievement gap. I think they've updated the terminology. So been working on it for 20 years. You know, it's funny, Marla, you disaggregated the data around disciplinary interventions in our schools, and I appreciate that. I wonder if we could have a conversation about the lack of kids who can read well and on grade level, and the most recent test scores that came out, albeit during COVID, but still, you know, 40% of our kids are not on grade level, and that's a problem. And then when you take that and you disaggregate that data, do we have the numbers that say, well, that that population, that minority population is, not on grade level. So maybe it's 85%, whatever. And then think about those interventions in the schools where we can think about solving the opportunity gap. So, I wonder if we could talk in this forum, and maybe we'll get to it in the next 15 minutes, but about really the learnings in our school and the lack of being on grade level for so many of our students, a near majority. That to me is kind of horrifying, and would love to have that conversation.
Thank you, Meredith. Next question. What current Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools initiatives or programs make you the most proud, and why? We'll start with Tim.
I like the meals program, the school lunch and school breakfast program that every kid gets no matter what. We are not worried about who can and who can't afford a meal, and we are not worried about whether their level of income is met this month versus next month. We're not means testing kids and their parents to decide whether or not they should be able to eat that day. And I think that is that's the single best program that I can think of. Another thing, during the pandemic, when so many people when every kid was sent home, I think that the school board did a great job of addressing the differences in access to technology. Not every kid had a high-speed internet connection. Not every kid had a reliable high-speed internet connection that would facilitate their ability to learn in the classroom. And so the district sent home little 4G modems that were just little portable things that you could hook up that automatically worked with your kid's iPad. And it really helped, bridge that gap a little bit. And so those are two fantastic programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. George.
Thank you. A couple of programs come to mind. One is a dual language program. I think that's just a real plus for the district with dual language programs in Spanish and Mandarin. And that's just a real bonus. But the one I get most excited about is what I call career and technical ed, career and college promise programs. And they're little known in the talk, but they're not little known to the students and the teachers that are involved in them. My own son had some challenges in school. He's an elevator mechanic today. He's in a union. He's an apprentice. He's 30 years old now, and he makes in the mid six figures in income, and way more than I ever made as a teacher, trust me, and it has a great benefits package. He did not go to a four-year college. He was in some career training programs in school. So the idea that we can help prepare high school students for life beyond high school is important, and that there is life beyond four-year college or before four-year college or in lieu of four-year college or whatever I'm looking to say. That's the program. We have lots of tracks for kids to go into, whether it's community college or it's college credit while they're in high school. And I think that's a strength of the district that could even be enhanced more. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Risa.
Well, I'm going to say a program that is being revisioned right now. So they're restructuring the vision of it, and I hope they bring it back. And that's the Blue Ribbon Mentor Program. Look, my kids were too young to participate in the program, but I would have to say I've heard so many great things, not only from the staff who worked in the program to mentors to even the students who participated in it. So my hope is that that program would come back in some form or fashion so that students really can take advantage of it. Also, the AVID program is a really great offering in our schools. So far, both of my kids in middle school have gone through that program, and I think it's a great opportunity to really get kids thinking beyond just being kids, because it's going to come, it's going to happen. So I think that AVID program is a really great resource in the schools to get kids thinking beyond just what's right in front of them right now. And another thing that I really appreciate is a lot of the collaborative efforts our district has with organizations like the Public School Foundation, Table Porch, and even the PTA. It was just really great to see all of these groups work together in even stronger fashion during the pandemic, but then also it brought awareness to some of the work that they were doing prior to the pandemic, offering grants, things like that for opportunities for staff and teachers to participate in trainings and other opportunities that maybe they don't have personally the resources for, or even their school has the resources to send them on. So it was just really great to see a lot of our collaborative efforts that we have with this unique organization, the Public School Foundation.
Thank you, Risa. Meredith.
Yeah, I would echo Risa's comments about the AVID program. That is one of the stronger programs I've seen, and had kind of firsthand exposure to that last year. So I would definitely echo that. I think that this is a community of people, and I think that the teachers rely on each other, and the principals rely on the teachers, and vice versa. And I will say that while there's nothing formal about it, the sort of professional support that I've seen, at least at Rashkis over the past several years, has been pretty phenomenal. So I hope that we could, as a board members, should we be elected, be empowered to sort of empower those folks and try to continue those and it kind of expand some of those programs. I think in particular, training young and strong principals coming out of, undergrad, graduate school, to get them in the schools early would be a great thing. I know that there's a lot of work going on at the university level to do that sort of training and programming. So those are just a couple.
Thank you, Meredith. Mike.
I'm going to add on to what George was talking about with career and technical education. The last 5 years when I worked at Culbreth, I was in the CTE department. It's a great and tight-knit group of people with an excellent leader, Kathy Brewer. And they are really working hard to normalize the idea that not everyone is going to college, and that is acceptable, and that can be financially rewarding. They've been doing a lot of great publicity in our classrooms. We've got large posters that show trees of the goals that we have in the program, and then what the careers can become. If you follow this path in food preparation or firefighting or anything like that, and so it's getting a lot of people. It's opening a lot of eyes to middle and high school kids of other avenues besides just what they've been told is that you're supposed to go on to college. Two exciting things that our CTE program specifically has recently is that we've got firefighting training, including having our own fire engine. And so these firefighters work with the local firefighters and get their training, and they're ready to go straight out of school. We've also recently bought an ambulance, or I think we got an ambulance donated. And so the EMT training is happening as well. And those are both really exciting programs that I'm seeing in CTE.
Thank you, Mike. Next question. When you think about the multifaceted role of being a school board member, what aspect of the work do you feel the most confident, and where do you think you will have the biggest learning curve? We'll start with George.
I think the most confident is that my professional background has prepared me to understand school law, school finance, how the system works. I don't have to spend a lot of time getting up to speed on a lot of things as to why they're like they are in our public education system. And I'm also clear about the role of the school board being to set the big picture issues, if you will, and stay out of the weeds with day-to-day administration. My learning curve, oh my goodness, it would be so steep. My learning curve's been steep since the day I filed for the Board of Education. I'm sure my colleagues here would agree. It is the vast number of programs we have, the vast number of differences, and our community is so diverse, and we've got so many needs to meet. And so it would be, how can we effectively, truly be inclusive and address the learning needs of every student in this community? And that would be the biggest challenge as a board member. And I would look forward to a challenge like that. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Risa.
Well, I think from day one, I know my strategic decision-making will definitely come in handy on the role for the board, and also my previous, my current board membership and also membership on the school improvement team. Additionally, I've been involved in the schools for 10 years, so I have a lot of knowledge in terms of how Chapel Hill Carver City Schools work. Attend a lot of meetings about budget, ask a lot of questions of the finance staff, in-depth questions about budgets and how allocations are made, both of federal, state to local funds as well. And then also I'm very knowledgeable in a lot of the policies within our district as well. Again, I ask a lot of questions of board members and staff about the policies in our district and things like that. I think one of the biggest learning curve is really understanding, like George said, a lot of the programs. You really don't know until at times, sometimes your kids are in the school and you didn't realize that there were so many programs within that one school, but there are other programs potentially that are at other different schools, or as they matriculate through middle school and high school, there are other programs that you'll find as well. So I think it'll be a great pleasure to hear about all the programs that we have in our district and hear about all the wonderful staff who administer those programs. So,
Thank you, Risa. Meredith.
Sure. I would say that I'm a problem solver. I don't necessarily have to be the expert in the room, but I have the ability to take pretty complicated ideas and issues and deduce them down and problem solve for them. I would say that I have a pretty proven track record in thinking about data-driven decision-making and solutions. And that's been exhibited on the K through 12 policy level, as well as the higher education policy level, both on the national and state level here. So I feel confident. I think another area that I feel confident in is that in looking and listening to you all, and this is the first time I wasn't able to participate in your forum last week, but I think I bring a different perspective. I think we all have different priorities, and I can use that to my advantage. I think that there is a voice out there that isn't represented on this current school board, and so I think I can advocate for that voice and advocate for maybe different ways to think about education policy and the lack of reading proficiency and math proficiency across the district. My learning curve would obviously be that it's a behemoth, massive, ship to steer, and so it's getting in there and trying to dig into it. But I feel confident in my ability to do that.
Thank you, Meredith. Mike.
I think my experience working in both elementary and middle schools, and then having children who've gone through the high school, I do feel like I have a pretty good feel for the programs that we offer in our district. What I don't think I have as good a sense of is the opinions about those programs among our entire community, because there are many. If you take something like dual language, for example, I know that there have been issues in the past, specifically with the Chinese program at Glenwood, and people have been very passionate on both sides of issues like this. And I think, as a board member, it's going to be difficult to work to find out what all of those different positions might be, and to do that prior to being asked to make some kind of decision about it.
Thank you, Mike. Tim.
I think I would be most confident in bringing common sense ideas and sensible solutions to the board, and try to cut through the Gordian knots that the district is kind of always trying to tie itself up into. I think that my most confidence is doing things like communicating with the community, listening to parents, listening to teachers. I think these are easy things for me to do. And my job is processing a lot of information and trying to come up with the best strategy and the best outcome, and something that helps out people the most. My biggest learning curve would be the nitty-gritty. We're doing Robert's Rules of Order at the meeting. We're setting an agenda. We are deciding that this committee needs to do this and this task force needs to do this. I think that would be getting a feel for the controls of the ship and learning how to effectively steer it toward these common sense goals, I think would be the biggest challenge for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. All right, now each candidate will share his or her final remarks. Please tell why you should be elected to the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools Board of Education, what sets you apart from the other candidates, and we'll start with Riza.
My name is Riza Jenkins, and I should be elected to the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools Board of Education because I'm a change agent with a proven track record in strategic decision-making in order to provide the best educational outcomes for all students. My 3 focus areas are going to be increasing the intentional work around diversity and equity in our district, both for our students and our staff. Additionally, I want to ensure that we are transparent and accountable to this Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools district and all of its stakeholders. And finally, I want to ensure that we are being fiscally responsible to all of our stakeholders and all of our taxpayers. The work that I've done in this district supports why I should be elected. Through my leadership as the president of the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools PTA Council, I standardized the school improvement team election process to increase diversity of parent representatives. I've supported our staff, students, and schools through my years of leadership with the PTA and school improvement team. Also, my commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion extends beyond the schools through my professional personal career. I'm the chair of the EDI committee for North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association. I was a coordinator for Women of Strata, a corporate organization to increase women representation and participation in my workplace. And also I participate in a number of women and diversity initiatives in my industry and throughout the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Riza. Meredith.
Hi, I'm Meredith Pruitt, and I'm thrilled to be running for Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools Board of Education. You know what? This is not about me. This is about the parents and the students and the administrators and the principals and the teachers and our taxpayers. And I think I stand for common sense, database decisions and solutions. I think it's about getting our students and making sure they're in class full time and learning and focusing on the fundamentals of reading, math, and science. I do think we have to tackle that opportunity gap through data-driven solutions and decisions. And I think we need to better power our teachers, principals, and administrators with professional opportunities. I'm thrilled to be here. I am a product of the public school education. I am the first in my family to go to college. And as George started out by saying, I do believe this is our opportunity to pay it forward. And I just look forward to your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. Mike.
I'm Mike Sharp. I am passionate about education in our district, and I am a strong advocate for the people who are often underrepresented. As a teacher in the district for a long time, I feel that we have the institutional memory that's missing from the quick turnover at Lincoln Center. And I feel like I can bring that information to the board in terms of what programs have been successful and what does this look like in an actual classroom when it's happening. I also think that my experience as a parent and working at the different levels of schools in both elementary and middle school gives me a wide variety of experience of the different programs that are currently happening in our district.
Thank you, Mike. Tim.
I'm Tim Sukram. I hope you vote for me, but I'm pretty sure you get 3 votes, and I'm happy to be your number 3. I think that we can do better as a school board, as a school district. I think that the board needs someone who is listening to folks, who's collaborating, who cares and who shows it, and cares about students, about the teachers, the parents, the staff, and everybody touched by the school district. I think we can fix problems with communication. I think we can fix problems with transparency. I think we can make long-term decisions that will be good for this generation, these kids, as they go from kindergarten to 12th grade. I think that COVID is, frankly, I think it's a warm-up fight. And I think that there may be tougher decisions that need to come down further along the way, and we need to think about them. And that there are new opportunities that are coming out in the forms of pre-K programs that we can expand on and that we can help kids in our community before they even get into kindergarten. And I think it's opportunities like this and challenges that we face that we really need to look forward to. So feel free, make me your number 3. I know you got 2 other people you like better. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. George.
Thank you. I'm George Griffin. It's been a pleasure being here. Marlo, thank you for a really nice, tight 90 minutes, getting us through a lot of topics. And, I feel relieved tonight after hearing all the candidates. It was like, boy, there's some really, really strong candidates for the Board of Ed. And I'm excited to be a part of this group. What I bring to it is my experience, my background. A former teacher, high school principal, school administrator, university professor. I spent the last 10 years in 25 states, including in North Carolina, in public schools, in classrooms, observing, seeing what's going on and helping districts improve how they teach and how students learn. I am dedicated to equity issues here in the district. It's time to move past talk and into some action. Systemic changes are in order. We haven't talked about capital improvement needs. I have a strong background in school finance. We have 9 schools with unfunded, dire capital improvement needs right now and no money in sight. I have a strong background in social emotional learning. That's actually been the linchpin of my entire career, working with children with behavior problems and learning problems. I am supportive of teachers. We've got to do more to support our teachers, advocate for them, get them those salary increases with the General Assembly. And finally, I'm dedicated to making sure our schools are safe. So I would appreciate, as Tim said, one of your votes for me. Thank you.
We would like to once again thank each of our candidates for joining us for this conversation. We look forward to seeing you next time on Tar Heel Teachers.